found that the Coos quality of life scale was the best individual PRO to predict the decision to do a total joint replacement. The Coos quality of life score of less than 35, where 100 is excellent quality of life, 0 is terrible quality of life, was the best individual PRO to predict total joint replacement. So, this has been looked at for 15 plus years. And while David, I think, makes an excellent suggestion that you can reduce the sample size by recruiting people with higher pain scores at baseline, those individuals, if they fail to respond in terms of a pain response, are much more likely to either reach the outcome if they haven't already achieved the outcome at the time they were entered into the study. So it's going to be a tension between enrolling people who are symptomatic but haven't yet achieved the outcome into a study where they're at high risk of achieving that outcome.
I'm not sure our surrogate endpoint, if it's a TJR or if it's a severe state, I'm not sure that is mechanism dependent for a study. Those things to me seem like a fracture in an osteoporosis trial. It seems like that's an endpoint that is irrespective of your mechanism. Where the mechanism might be important is with respect to tissue, let's say cartilage or bone, which are the ones that have been studied most so far. And again, I'm not so sure that even is mechanistic specific. Bone shape, we know, changes irrespective of whether you've got a target that's affecting bone or cartilage. It's a marker of the global knee joint process. So I think both the imaging, and if I'm interpreting right what I hear today, and I think this is what FDA has said before, that to have an imaging surrogate, it would need, at least in the first instance, to be embedded in a trial with one of these other endpoints to show its relationship to these other endpoints down the line. But I'll separate an imaging structural endpoint with predictive validity from these hard endpoints of TJR plus severe state, which I think is a separate thing. But I don't think they would need to be mechanism dependent for companies developing different sort of action drugs. And just a quickie to say, David's very right about what would go in the progression cohort. Some of the progression cohort have no symptoms and have no OA, indeed, when you look at them in detail. So I think you could make those figures even better.
I think the idea of looking at either end of the road, what Tim called end of the road, or virtual joint replacement, similar ideas, has a couple of potential drawbacks that I think just in making the decision on the part of the FDA, they need to consider the pros and cons of each of these. If you do it this way, what is likely to happen is you're going to recruit into trials people with quite severe advanced disease, and it'll be questionable as to how this, if there's an effect on pain, how that is relevant, or whether it generalizes to everyone with pain and not just those at the severe level. The other issue is it's a dichotomous outcome. And in rheumatoid arthritis, we went through this. What happens with the dichotomous outcome is you compromise power. You have less power. We're now using continuous outcomes in osteoarthritis pain trials, and that gives us more power. And one of the reasons why the Kim article shows the sample sizes are so impressively large is that she's requiring a dichotomous outcome in order for us to avoid that dichotomous outcome, in order for us to get significant efficacy. And it works okay in rheumatoid arthritis now because we have a lot of effective therapies, and we want to ask for large trials to be able to distinguish treatment effects. It doesn't work so well in osteoarthritis, where we really don't have a lot of wonderful effective therapies. And it would be helpful to know if therapies are modestly different with respect to continuous outcomes. So from a statistical / clinical epidemiologic perspective, I'm not sure how well it works.
I want to give a cautionary note that finding a subgroup of people in a large observational database that have high pain and saying that's a subgroup that might be targeted, you have to be really careful about taking that into a clinical trial, because even in large observational trials that we and others have been involved in pain, it takes 2 to 3 months for people to come back to their mean, to get rid of regression to the mean. And in fact, as someone who's looked at a ton of pain trials, I think about 2/3 of what we call the placebo effect is regression to the mean, and 1/3 is a true placebo effect. And so I just be cautioned that the one way of getting those high pain people is to really get them when they're at their worst, and then you're gonna, the problem you'll have is a really high placebo effect rate that you'll have to mitigate against. And I don't think we've, in the broader pain field, really done a good enough job of getting rid of regression to the mean. At most, we have a 1 or 2 week run-in period. That's not long enough to get rid of the natural history of these conditions is longer. And if we really wanted to get rid of regression to the mean with a run-in, it would have to be longer than a week or 2.